and this is why people drive SUVs, because the roads are basically like war fields. Ciao, I'm Mario, the Swiss car guy on YouTube, and today I'm driving around in my 2009 Nissan GT-R. I am on my commute to work, and of course it's this car in its natural habitat, the inner cities. Not exactly Nissan GT-R territory, is it? The topic for today's video came up when I was talking with Dowd Driving Distilled on his podcast, and he basically said that to him it is difficult to talk about the car's interior when he does a review because he doesn't really care about interiors. Where I thought, well, I care a lot about interiors and I could go on talking on and on about interiors, and this is actually what this video is. So the exciting topic for this video is car interiors. And me personally, I think I'm more of an interior than an exterior guy. Meaning that I can tolerate a car that's ugly on the outside if it has a really nice interior. And I think, interestingly enough, a car I'm currently considering to be the replacement of my Nissan GT-R is a car that I think is quite fugly, honestly, but has a sort of a really nice interior. So to me it becomes tolerable. I'm not telling you what car it is that I'm looking into right now, but comment down below if you can guess it. I mean, you have enough hints. It's ugly on the outside, it's pretty on the inside. What I can tell you is it's not necessarily that much slower than a GT-R. Because I thought I wanted a slower car, then I went to drive a slower car and no. So comment down below. Your guess is as good as anyone's, except for Dowd Driving Distilled. You're forbidden to comment on it because you know what car I'm looking into. But anyways, car interiors. You see, I am an egoist. When I buy a car for myself and not for other people. And a great looking car is basically a gift for other people, because while you sit in the car, you don't really see too much of it. Sure, you will know you drive something that's really good looking, but when you're sat in the car, all you see is basically the interior. Therefore, I prefer to have a car with a nice interior, because that's for me and not for other people to look at. I think my infatuation on car interiors, is very well reflected in the cars that I've owned. Because you know, there is one car whose name I never mention. And to many people that's like a very plain car, and they think it looks like a Passat. And to me, the exterior was perfectly fine because it was a very nicely understated car. It was a car that didn't really shout about itself, and I like that. Also with the Bentley wheels, I think it looked quite neat. But the other thing is, that car had, in my opinion, a very, very, very nice interior. Not only did it look really opulent, and you may even say in some ways a bit kitschy, everything was covered in leather. It used really nice wood, and it was quite solid wood in some parts, and in other parts, like any car, it was just coated plastic. But it had metal in it, and the leather, it was the softest, nicest leather you can have. It was of course optional leather and not base leather, but then again, that car, and also I kept it so long because it had such a nice interior. And also it had very comfortable seats with massage and ventilation and heating. So even though that car cost me a lot of money to run, it was a very nice place to be in. And to me, this is very important. Before that, I had the Lexus LS430, and the LS430, especially the pre-facelift version, I think it's not a very pretty car. I mean, the first time I saw one, I was shopping for LS400s back at the time, and I never even considered the LS430 because I thought it was very ugly, until I sat in one, and then I realized that, well, not only does it have a really nice interior, much nicer than the LS400s actually, but it's also super spacious and roomy, and it's so much a better car for me. And all of a sudden I didn't really care that the car didn't look so good anymore, because it had a nice interior, and that was where I was going to spend most of my time. The problem with me liking nice interior is that I'm actually always drawn to these luxury cars, so these high-end cars, because they tend to have nicer interiors, nicer materials, better finished, and everything else in comparison is a bit of a letdown. And I know that sounds very unimportant, but to me it is very important. And this is also why every time I get like in a regular car, in an economy car, I cannot not talk about the interior. I mean, even the GTR. And the GTR, in many respects, is a bit of an economy car. Certainly not in fuel economy and running costs, but when I got the GTR, I realized there had been some cost savings measures. I mean, the interior, it's still nice. You still have nice leather with stitching in lots of places. There is a lot of plastic, but it's at least soft touch plastic, so it's not hard plastic. But in my worldview, this should be leather as well, because, I mean, why not? This is an expensive car. But then again, this car doesn't even have a light in the glove compartment that is independent of your main lights. Meaning that when your lights are off and you open the glove compartment stays dark, because they had to save 30 cents on a switch that turned that light on and off. I think the GTR's interior is nice enough, and more importantly to me, it is kind of unique. When you sit in a GTR, you don't feel like you're sitting in a Fiat Panda or in an Audi. It feels positively GTR. I mean, they changed it with the facelift in 2017 or when it was. They did it completely differently, which I think it became a bit nicer, but a bit less GTR, which, you can like it both ways. I personally prefer the old style interior. So I mean, you cannot really expect a car to be all slathered in leather and having the best materials. But to me, this is something I really like, because it makes a car feel more high-end, more upmarket, more luxurious than it may be, even though it's actually not really that relevant if you think about it, because even this plastic, how often are you going to touch it? I mean, usually you're not going to touch it, but I like to touch things. Given that car interiors are important to me, personally, I like to prefer cars that have bright interiors. So like my Lexus, light gray, or maybe a white interiors or tan interiors. I tend to really like them. And yes, I understand that right now I'm sitting in a car with basically a black interior with some nice red accents. And in this car, I think it's okay. Not every car does bright interiors well. And in my opinion, the GTR is well suited to having black everything. And I mean, this is a black edition, right? So it would be kind of weird if the interior wasn't black. But normally I prefer lighter colors, also because they make the interior seem larger. They give less of a claustrophobic feeling. And if you see my Toyota Supra review, you actually know that I liked the car if it wasn't for the interior, which was very small feeling, very claustrophobic, very dark and dismal, which is something I don't like. Even the GTR does not have the most spacious interior, but if I look out to the side, I actually see the outside world and not the top of the window. Another thing that to me is deeply, deeply linked with car interiors is car interior smells. Because to me, it's also very important the way the inside of a car smells. And it's also a pretty obvious reason why I could never buy a smoker's car. I remember looking at a Lexus LS430 many, many years ago, and the car looked really nice. It was very well cared for, it was very well maintained, and I thought, this is a nice car. Until I got in it, and I realized, oh my god, this car smells like an ashtray. And I went on a test drive, and within I think 15 minutes of driving that car, I got dizzy from all that nicotine and smoke smell. A smoker car, that's something you never really clean, you never really get rid of. And even if you do all these treatments that you can do with ozone and stuff like that, usually when it's a nice hot sunny days, the smells keep coming back. So for me, a smoker's car is always a no-go, absolutely no-go. But also I prefer cars with leather interior, because leather tends to have this nice subtle leather smell if it's a nice leather interior. And I also realized that different leathers smell differently. And usually my old Luxor barges that I tend to drive, they usually have quite good leather in them. And so throughout the cabin there is this very subtle but very nice leather smell. So when I go look at one of these cars and I find that smell, I immediately feel at home, and that makes it quite a bit more likely that I will buy a car like that. So basically my LS430, the car whose name I don't mention, and even my LS600H, they all have this very similar, very subtle interior smell. And I really like these subtle smells. It's a reason why I don't use car deodorants or things like that. I think they're quite terrible. I want to have a car's natural smell, if that makes sense, because usually most cars nowadays, they smell quite neutral. So having this very light hint of leather, to me it's just that little icing on the cake. I also like how smells, especially in cars for me, manage to bring me to different places in time. How certain smells just trigger some memories. For example, my uncle used to have an old Fiat 500 when I was a kid, so eternities ago. And that car had like a vinyl interior, it had rubber floor mats, and I don't know which part of it is exactly, but there was also this like a sweet vinyl rubber smell in those cars. And if you know like Fiats from the 60s, from the 70s, you will know what smell I'm talking about. And as soon as I get into one of those cars, as soon as I smell that, I'm taken back to me being like 4 years old in that car. And it's the same for other smells as well. For example, my Mercedes SL55 AMG that I had, that car had a bit of a problem with fuel fumes. So in the cabin, you would have sometimes a pretty strong smell of fuel. And the reason for that, I think, is because the car has like the swash plates inside the fuel tank, they get loose because they're like tack welded on. And the remedy for that is to drill a screw into the tank and through the swash plate to stabilize it. And usually those screws, they tend to leak a bit of fumes. So if you have that, you would have to undo the cladding and then to, I don't know, put some sealant or stuff on it. I never did because it was too much work, but it means that on certain days, my car smelled like a fuel refinery. And every time I smell these fumes, like when I'm filling up the car at the petrol station, I'm reminded of that car. So you got good and bad smells, but no matter what they are, given the time you spend in a car, usually they trigger some memory of a car if a car smelled that way. Also, that was one of the reasons I wanted to get rid of the car, because I didn't want to do the fix. I could have done it, but And I couldn't really have a car that, you know, on certain days would smell bad. I smell bad enough, right? The other thing with car interiors is that some car manufacturers do it better than others. There are certain brands I don't particularly like, and some of them for multiple reasons, but some of them specifically because they don't have nice interiors, or at least for a period of time they didn't do nice interiors. Point in case for me is BMW. I think there are many reasons to dislike BMW, and I'm not going to go into those in this video. But to me, BMW interiors, I mean, they have improved recently, but in the past, and especially during the Bengal era, I thought they were absolutely terrible. Not only were they not nice looking, but something that to this day still persists in BMWs is the leather. If you get a BMW with the base leather, so you don't pay for having, I think, real leather, it's plastic. You can't tell me it's leather. I mean, it might be very durable, it might be a very good product from that perspective, but don't sell it as leather, when to me it's indistinguishable from vinyl. I never managed to really gel with BMW interiors, because first, on the very old cars like the E30s and so, they were quite austere. They were very Germanic, very boring, sure, functional and driver focused, but to me they lacked the pizzazz I like. So I always preferred the interior of a contemporary Mercedes, even if those were boring and antiquated in their own way, or, you know, more close to my home, I preferred the interiors of car brands like Lancia. I think Lancia did great interiors for their time, and when you sat in one of those cars, it was just an uplifting experience. Even cars like the Thesis, a car that had a bit of an unfortunate styling, maybe more than a bit of an unfortunate styling. That car was looking very sad, and it was also quite a baroque car. It was not very sporty, which doesn't really match Lancia's racing heritage. But that car, for all its faults, it had a really nice interior. And this is why I always kind of liked that car, even though it had looks that even a mother would struggle to love. But I've outed myself. I'm somebody who prefers the inside to the outside. You can say interior values rather than exterior appearances. But no, I'm just an egoist. I like it when it's nice for me and not nice for others. How are you? Do you like car interiors more than exteriors? Or are you the exhibitionist that you want to have the car everybody looks at? Which I personally don't care for, but hey, different strokes, right? Please comment down below, let me know what you think about it. And I've almost arrived at work, so this video is going to end. Consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more weird videos of me. And sometimes I even bake in my videos, not in this one though, because I think it's long enough. Anyway, thanks for watching, have a nice day, bye. Oh, I will do the tunnels like they do the wormholes in Star Trek. Tunnel in 3, 2, 1.
Oh my god, we just entered a tunnel. Get us out of here.
Oh my god, that gets me sick.